The evening air had turned crisp as autumn settled over the city. Dion Taylor pulled his varsity basketball jacket tighter around his shoulders as he pushed open the door to McDonald's. The familiar smell of fries and the warm light inside offered a welcome break from the cool night. His muscles ached from the extra drills Coach Wilson had put the team through. But the soreness felt good, a reminder that regionals were just around the corner. "Hey, Mrs. Harper," Dion called out, waving to the older woman behind the counter. She'd worked at this McDonald's since before he was born, and always slipped him an extra packet of barbecue sauce with his order. "Well, if it isn't our star player," she replied with a warm smile. "The usual?" Dion nodded, digging into his pocket for the crumpled bills he'd earned tutoring middle schoolers in math. "Practice ran late. Coach thinks we've got a shot this year." "You bet you do," Mrs. Harper said, punching in his order. "Your jumper's looking better than those pros on TV." Dion laughed, feeling a flush of pride. He'd been working on his three-pointer all summer, shooting hoops at the community center until the janitor kicked him out at closing time. His dad had been right. Hard work really did pay off. He moved to the side to wait for his food, pulling out his phone to check the time. His mom would be finishing her hospital shift soon. He wanted to get home before she did so he could heat up the lasagna his grandmother had dropped off. His mom worked too hard to have to worry about dinner, too. The door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air. Dion glanced up, noticing two police officers entering. Something about their posture, tense, scanning the room quickly, made his stomach tighten. He'd been raised to respect police, but also to be careful around them. "Keep your hands visible, be polite, don't make sudden movements," his father had instructed him countless times. Dion looked back down at his phone, trying to seem casual while keeping the officers in his peripheral vision. They were talking to each other in low voices, one of them holding what looked like a printed photo. "Number 42, called out the cashier, sliding a tray across the counter. Dion stepped forward, reaching for his meal. That's when he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Hold up, son," said a gruff voice. Dion turned slowly, coming face to face with one of the officers. A stocky man with a square jaw and hard eyes. The name on his badge read Officer Peterson. "Is there a problem, sir?" Dion asked, his voice steady despite the sudden pounding in his chest. The second officer, taller and younger, moved to Dion's other side. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Dion Taylor, sir." He kept his hands visible, resting them lightly on the counter edge. Officer Peterson exchanged a glance with his partner. "Got any ID on you?" "Yes, sir." Dion reached slowly toward his back pocket. "My wallet's right here." "Hold it," snapped Peterson. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Confusion washed over Dion. "But you just asked for my ID." "Turn around. Hands behind your back," the younger officer instructed, his hand moving to rest on his holster. The restaurant had gone quiet. From the corner of his eye, Dion could see other customers watching, some with phones raised. Mrs. Harper stood frozen behind the register, her eyes wide with concern. "There must be some mistake," Dion said, his voice rising slightly. "I just came from basketball practice. My coach can verify. Turn around now," Peterson repeated, louder this time. Heart racing, Dion complied. Cold metal closed around his wrists with a decisive click. "What's happening?" he asked, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "What did I do?" "You matched the description of a suspect in an armed robbery at the convenience store 3 blocks from here," the younger officer explained, patting Dion down. "Black male, teen, athletic build, dark hoodie. But I've been at basketball practice for the last 2 hours," Dion protested. "My whole team can tell you that. My coach, too." Peterson ignored him, turning to his partner. "Check his wallet." The younger officer removed Dion's wallet, flipping it open to examine his school ID. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harper had come out from behind the counter. "Officers, I know this young man," she said firmly. "He comes in here all the time. He's a good kid, straight A student." "Ma'am, please stay back," Peterson warned. "This is police business." "But you've got the wrong person," she insisted. "Dion was in here yesterday too, right after his study group. He couldn't have done whatever you're saying." The restaurant manager, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, emerged from the back office. "What's going on out here?" "They're arresting Dion," Mrs. Harper told him. "For something he didn't do." The manager frowned. "Officers, can we talk about this? I know this young man." Sir, we're following procedure, the younger officer stated. We have reason to believe this individual matches the description of a suspect in a crime committed this evening. Dion felt sick. This couldn't be happening. He'd never been in trouble a day in his life. He maintained a 4.0 GPA, volunteered at the library on weekends, had already been accepted to 3 colleges, and now he was being handcuffed in front of everyone like a criminal. Can I at least call my parents? He asked, trying to keep his voice level. My mom's a nurse at General. My dad works for the city planning department. You'll get your phone call at the station, Peterson said, taking Dion's arm and steering him toward the door. The young officer grabbed Dion's backpack from where it sat beside the counter. We'll need to search this too. My homework's in there, Dion said, and my calculator. It's expensive. Please be careful with it. As they led him through the restaurant, Dion felt every eye on him. A little boy sitting with his mother whispered, "What did he do, Mom?" The woman hushed him, pulling him closer. Outside, the night air felt colder than before. A police cruiser sat at the curb, lights flashing silently. Nearby, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion. "Watch your head," Peterson said mechanically as he guided Dion into the back seat. The door slammed shut with finality. Through the window, Dion could see Mrs. Harper and the manager standing in the doorway of McDonald's, their faces creased with worry. Several customers had followed them outside, phones still recording. The younger officer slid into the driver's seat while Peterson took the passenger side. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind Dion's cooling meal and the whispers of onlookers. "Officers," Dion tried again, leaning forward as much as the handcuffs would allow. "I think there's been a serious mistake. I've never stolen anything in my life." Peterson turned in his seat. The suspect was wearing a dark hoodie and basketball shoes. "Just like you. Half the guys at my school dress like this," Dion replied, frustration edging into his voice. "It's not exactly unique." The witness description was specific, the younger officer added, catching Dion's eye in the rearview mirror. "We're just doing our job." Dion sat back, trying to stay calm. His father's words echoed in his mind. "If you're ever stopped by police, don't argue. Stay respectful. We'll sort it out later." He'd never imagined he'd need to follow that advice while being driven to a police station in handcuffs. As the car turned onto Main Street, Dion thought about his phone in his jacket pocket. They hadn't taken it yet. His uncle's number was just a few taps away. Uncle Ray would know what to do. He always did. But reaching for his phone now would only make things worse. Dion closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing the way Coach taught them to do before free throws. In, out, how much further to the station?" he asked quietly. "About 10 minutes, the younger officer replied, his tone softening slightly. "Just sit tight." Dion nodded, watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood pass by through the window. The same streets he'd walked 1,000 times. The same streets where, apparently, he now looked like a criminal. The car stopped at a red light. Through the window, Dion spotted Mr. Washington, his elderly neighbor, walking his dog. Their eyes met briefly before the light changed and the car moved on. The look of confusion and concern on Mr. Washington's face said everything. In that moment, as the police cruiser carried him further from the life he knew, Dion had no idea that this terrible mistake was about to lead to a discovery that would change everything. The police station buzzed with activity as officers led Dion through the front doors. The bright fluorescent lights made him squint after the darkness of the patrol car. A dispatcher answered phones at the front desk while uniformed officers moved between desks, some typing reports, others talking to people seated in plastic chairs along the wall. Officer Peterson guided Dion toward a bench near the booking area. "Wait here," he ordered, removing the handcuffs. "Don't move." Dion rubbed his wrists, relief washing over him as the tight metal cuffs came off. He sat quietly, watching the younger officer, whose nameplate read Officer Torres, place his backpack on a nearby desk. "I need to call my parents," Dion said, his voice low but firm. "It's their right to know I'm here." Torres glanced at Peterson, who gave a short nod. "You'll get your call. We need to run your information first." A heavy-set officer behind the booking desk looked up. "What's this one in for?" "Possible suspect in the convenience store robbery on Maple," Peterson answered. Description matched. "Kid claims he was at basketball practice." The booking officer looked Dion up and down. Something flickered across his face, doubt perhaps. "You got ID?" Torres handed over Dion's wallet. The booking officer opened it, examining Dion's school ID and bus pass. His eyebrows raised slightly. Jefferson High? You on their basketball team? He asked, his tone shifting. Dion nodded. Yes, sir. 3 years now. Varsity. My nephew plays for Central, the officer said. You guys crushed us last month. A small opening. Dion leaned forward slightly. That was a good game. Coach Wilson had us practicing zone defense for weeks before that. The officer studied him for a moment longer, then turned to Peterson. The robbery suspect was reported as early 20s. This kid's what, 16, 17? 17, Dion confirmed. My birthday was last month. Peterson frowned. The witness said late teens, early 20s. Close enough to bring him in for questioning. The booking officer shrugged and continued typing Dion's information into the computer. Parents' names and contact info? My mom is Dr. Alicia Taylor. She's an emergency surgeon at General Hospital, Dion said, watching their faces. My dad is Robert Taylor. He works for the city planning department downtown. The officer's fingers paused over the keyboard. Dr. Taylor? The trauma surgeon? Dion nodded, a flutter of hope rising in his chest. The officer turned to Peterson. You know who his mother is? She saved Officer Grayson's kid last summer after that bad car wreck. Peterson's expression didn't change, but Torres shifted uncomfortably. Look, Dion said, taking advantage of the moment. I understand you're doing your job, but I really was at basketball practice until about 40 minutes before you found me. My coach can confirm it, so can 20 other players. The booking officer reached for the phone. Let me call the coach real quick to verify. Hold up, Peterson interrupted. We still need to follow procedure. The kid matches the description. A vague description, the booking officer countered, and his alibi is easy enough to check. Dion took a deep breath. Officers, instead of calling my parents right away, I'd like to call my uncle. He can get here faster. And who's your uncle? Torres asked. Dion met his eyes. Judge Raymond Wilson. He's a federal judge. The silence that followed felt electric. Peterson's face tightened while Torres blinked rapidly. Judge Wilson is your uncle? The booking officer asked, his voice careful. Yes, sir. My mother's brother. The booking officer leaned back in his chair, giving Peterson a look that clearly said, you messed up. He pushed the desk phone toward Dion. Make your call. Son. With steady hands, Dion dialed his uncle's number. It rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. Hello? Uncle Ray, it's Dion, he said, relief washing over him at the sound of his uncle's voice. I'm at the police station downtown. There's been a mistake. They think I robbed a store, but I was at basketball practice. The silence on the other end lasted only a second. Are you hurt? No, sir. Just confused. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't answer any questions until I arrive. Yes, sir. Dion hung up the phone, feeling steadier than he had since the officers first approached him at McDonald's. He looked up to find all 3 officers watching him with varying expressions of concern. He's on his way, Dion said, quietly. Peterson muttered something under his breath and walked away, disappearing through a door marked staff only. Torres awkwardly offered Dion a paper cup of water, which he accepted with a quiet thank you. The minutes ticked by slowly. Officers passing through the room glanced curiously at Dion, some whispering to the booking officer who responded with short headshakes. Dion sipped his water and tried to look calmer than he felt. Exactly 9 minutes after Dion's call, the station doors swung open. Uncle Ray strode in, his 6'4" frame commanding immediate attention. Even in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit and judicial robes, he carried an unmistakable authority. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Dion with visible relief. Uncle Ray. Dion started to stand. Stay seated, his uncle instructed gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder before turning to the booking officer. I'm Judge Raymond Wilson. I believe there's been a misunderstanding involving my nephew. The booking officer stood quickly. Yes, Your Honor, we were just verifying his alibi. And has it been verified? We're working on that, sir. Uncle Ray's expression remained neutral, but his voice took on the precise, measured tone Dion recognized from the few times he'd watched his uncle in court. My nephew is a minor who was taken into custody without proper cause. I'd like to speak with the arresting officers and the shift supervisor immediately. As if summoned by these words, the door to the back offices opened. A gray-haired man in a white shirt with captain's bars emerged, followed by Peterson and Torres. The captain's face was grave as he approached. "Judge Wilson," he said, extending his hand. "Captain Barnes, I've just been briefed on the situation." Uncle Ray shook his hand briefly. "Captain, I understand my nephew was arrested at a McDonald's based on a vague description that apparently amounted to young black male in athletic wear. Is that correct?" Captain Barnes grimaced. "The description was more specific than that, but after reviewing the facts, I believe there's been an unfortunate error. We've confirmed with his basketball coach that he was at practice until 7:15 p.m., Torres added quickly. "The robbery happened at 6:50 p.m. It couldn't have been him." Dayon felt a wave of vindication wash over him, followed quickly by anger. "They could have checked this before handcuffing him in public, I see," Uncle Ray said. "And was my nephew read his rights? Was he informed that he could have an attorney present during questioning?" Peterson stepped forward. "Sir, we hadn't begun formal questioning yet. We brought him in based on probable cause to determine if he was the suspect." "Probable cause?" Uncle Ray's eyebrow raised. "A description that could match thousands of young men in this city is hardly probable cause, officer." Captain Barnes raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Judge Wilson, we acknowledge that mistakes were made here. Officers Peterson and Torres were responding to an armed robbery and acting on the information they had at the time." "Information that was clearly insufficient," Uncle Ray countered. "Captain, I've spent 20 years on the bench. I know the difference between good police work and racial profiling." The words hung in the air. No one disputed them. Captain Barnes nodded soberly. "Your point is taken, Your Honor. We'll be conducting a full review of this incident." He turned to Dayon. "Young man, on behalf of the department, I apologize for the inconvenience and distress this has caused you." Inconvenience. Distress. The word seemed too small for what Dayon had experienced. "May I have my things back?" Dayon asked quietly. Torres quickly retrieved Dion's backpack and wallet. "Everything's there. We didn't search it yet." As Dayon stood to leave, the door to the station swung open again. A woman in scrubs burst in, her face tight with worry and anger. Behind her was a tall man in a button-up shirt and tie, moving with purpose. "Mom! Dad!" Dayon called out, relief flooding through him. Dr. Alicia Taylor rushed to her son, pulling him into a fierce hug before holding him at arm's length to examine him. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine, Mom," Dayon assured her. Uncle Ray got here quick. Robert Taylor placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder, his eyes moving from Dayon to the officers and back. "What happened?" "We got a call from Mrs. Harper at McDonald's saying you were arrested." Before Dayon could answer, Captain Barnes stepped forward. "Mr. and Dr. Taylor, I'm Captain Barnes. There's been a misunderstanding that we're in the process of rectifying." Dr. Taylor turned to the captain, her expression fierce. "A misunderstanding? My son was handcuffed in public and brought here like a criminal. And it should never have happened," the captain acknowledged. "The officers acted on incomplete information and we're deeply sorry." Uncle Ray placed a calming hand on his sister's arm. "Alicia, let's get Dayon home. We can discuss next steps tomorrow when everyone's had time to process this." Dayon's father nodded, though his jaw remained tight. "That's probably best. But this isn't over, Captain." As they turned to leave, Officer Torres stepped forward hesitantly. "Dr. Taylor, I just wanted to say, my partner and I made a mistake tonight. It wasn't personal." Dr. Taylor looked at the young officer for a long moment. "Officer Torres, when it happens to your child, it's always personal." With that, the family walked out of the station together, Dayon between his parents with his uncle following close behind. As they stepped into the cool night air, Dayon took a deep breath, feeling as though he was emerging from a nightmare. But as they approached his father's car, he couldn't shake the feeling that this night, this mistake, was about to change everything in ways none of them could yet imagine. The kitchen table had become a war room. 3 days after Dayon's arrest, his parents sat across from each other, a stack of papers between them. His mother's hospital badge lay discarded beside a cold cup of coffee. His father's tie hung loose around his neck, his usually neat appearance disheveled after hours of discussion. Dayon stood in the hallway listening. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. "This isn't just about Dayon," his father was saying. "Think about all the kids who don't have a federal judge for an uncle, who don't have parents who can afford lawyers." "I know that, Robert," his mother replied, her voice tired but firm. "But our first priority has to be protecting our son. and the best way to protect him is to make sure this never happens to him or anyone else again. Dion stepped into the kitchen doorway. Both parents looked up, his mother offering a tired smile. "Hey, honey, did we wake you?" she asked. "No," Dion said, moving to the refrigerator to pour himself some orange juice. Hard to sleep anyway. His father watched him with concerned eyes. "Nightmares again?" Dion shrugged, not wanting to admit that he'd woken up in a cold sweat, the phantom feeling of handcuffs still on his wrists. "It's getting better," he lied. "We were just discussing our options," his father explained, gesturing to the papers on the table, printouts of legal statutes, news articles about similar incidents, notes from Uncle Ray. Dion took a seat at the table. "The lawsuit?" His parents exchanged glances. "That's one option," his mother said carefully. "Uncle Ray thinks we have a strong case for civil rights violations. The department has already reached out through their lawyers about a settlement. They're scared," his father added. "As they should be." Dion stared into his orange juice. The night of his arrest, he'd been too shocked to process everything. Now anger came in waves, unpredictable and intense. During basketball practice yesterday, he'd missed shot after shot. His concentration shattered whenever he remembered the faces of customers watching him being led away in handcuffs. Coach had pulled him aside after practice. "Whatever's going on, Taylor, you know you can talk to me." But how could he explain? How could anyone understand unless they'd lived it? His phone buzzed in his pocket, another message from the group chat. His teammates had been blowing up his phone since a video of his arrest appeared online yesterday. Someone at McDonald's had recorded the whole thing, and now it was everywhere. "Have you checked social media today?" Dion asked his parents. His mother sighed. "I've been avoiding it." "Your father says it's pretty bad." "It's gone viral," his father confirmed. "The department's facing serious backlash. Captain Barnes called me twice today asking to meet with us." "What do they want?" Dion asked. "To make this go away quietly," his father said. "They're offering a formal apology, sensitivity training for the officers involved, and a confidential settlement." Dion pushed his orange juice away, suddenly not thirsty. "And what do we want?" His parents fell silent, looking at each other again in that way parents do when they're having a conversation without words. "That's something we wanted to discuss with you," his mother finally said. "This is happening to you, Dion. You should have a say in how we respond." The weight of their question settled on his shoulders. What did he want? Revenge? Money? For those officers to lose their jobs? "I need some air," he said, standing abruptly. "I'm going for a walk." "It's almost midnight," his mother protested. "Just around the block," Dion promised. "I'll be right back." Before they could object further, he grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door and stepped out into the night. The cool air filled his lungs, clearing his head slightly. Their street was quiet, the houses dark except for the occasional porch light. As he walked, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't the group chat, but a direct message from his friend Tyrell. "You seen this?" Tyrell had sent a link to a news article. Dion clicked it, waiting as the page loaded. The headline made his stomach drop. "Son of prominent doctor and nephew of federal judge wrongfully detained. Police department under fire." The article included quotes from sources close to the family and mentioned his mother's position at the hospital and his uncle's judicial appointment. There was even a mention of his GPA and college prospects. Dion put the phone back in his pocket without reading further. The story wasn't really about him anymore. It was about his family's status, about how someone like him, connected from a good family, shouldn't be treated this way. But what about the kids who didn't have doctors and judges in their family? What about his teammate Andre, whose single mom worked 2 jobs? Or his lab partner Khalil, whose parents were immigrants still learning English? If they'd been the ones handcuffed at McDonald's, would anyone care? As Dion rounded the corner back toward his house, he noticed a news van parked across the street. A reporter stood on the sidewalk talking into a microphone while a cameraman filmed. They hadn't seen him yet. Dion ducked behind a neighbor's hedge, heart racing. Were they here for him? How had they found his address? Carefully, he circled back, taking the alley behind his house to avoid being spotted. He slipped through the back gate and entered through the kitchen door. His parents were still at the table, now joined by Uncle Ray. All 3 looked up as he burst in. "There's news people outside," Dion said, slightly out of breath. Uncle Ray stood immediately. "I was afraid of this. The story's picking up traction nationally. Nationally? Dion echoed, disbelief washing over him. His mother came to his side, guiding him to a chair. Your Uncle Ray thinks we should hold a press conference. Get ahead of the narrative. What narrative? Dion asked. The one they're creating about you, his father explained. Right now you're being portrayed as the perfect victim. Honor student, athlete, good family. But we know how quickly that can change. They'll start digging, looking for anything to make this seem like less of an injustice. Uncle Ray nodded gravely. The department's already trying to justify the officer's actions. They've released a statement saying you matched a detailed description of the robbery suspect. But the coach confirmed I was at practice. Dion protested. They're claiming the timing wasn't impossible, that you could have left practice early, committed the robbery, then gone to McDonald's. Dion felt sick. They were trying to make him sound guilty despite having cleared him. His phone buzzed again, more messages pouring in. He pulled it out to silence it and saw a text from a number he didn't recognize. Be careful what you say to the press. Not all cops are bad. How are people getting my number? He asked, showing the message to his parents. His father took the phone, face darkening as he read the text. This stops now. We're getting you a new number tomorrow. Uncle Ray peered over his shoulder at the message. Save that. We may need it later. Dion slumped in his chair. 3 days ago, his biggest worry had been maintaining his GPA while preparing for regionals. Now he was getting mysterious texts and hiding from news crews. So what do? He asked, looking between the adults. Do we sue? Do we talk to the press? Do we just try to make it all go away? His mother sat beside him, taking his hand. That's what we were discussing when you came in. Your uncle thinks a lawsuit could create important precedent. Your father wants to push for policy changes in the department. Both are thinking about the bigger picture. And what do you think, Mom? Dion asked. She squeezed his hand. I'm thinking about my son who can't sleep. Who jumps when a car door slams. Who's afraid to go back to his favorite restaurant. The room fell silent. Dion felt the weight of their expectations, their different hopes for how this nightmare might turn into something meaningful. I've been doing some research, he said finally, about police training, about community relations programs, about what other cities have done after incidents like this. His father leaned forward, interest sparking in his tired eyes. What kind of research? There's this program in Oakland, Dion explained, gaining confidence as he spoke. They bring together teens and police officers for regular dialogue sessions. Not just talking, but working together on community projects, building relationships. And you think something like that could work here? Uncle Ray asked, his judicial neutrality slipping to reveal genuine curiosity. I don't know, Dion admitted, but I keep thinking about Officer Torres. He seemed, uncomfortable with the whole thing. Like maybe he knew it wasn't right but didn't know how to stop it. You're suggesting education instead of punishment, his father said thoughtfully. Not instead of, Dion clarified, but maybe along with it. Maybe there's a way to turn this into something that helps everyone. His mother's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and concern. That's a very mature perspective, honey. But you don't have to be the one to fix this. This isn't your burden to carry. Dion met her gaze. But it is, Mom. It happened to me. And maybe that's why I'm the right person to do something about it. Outside, they could hear more cars arriving, probably more news vans. Their quiet family discussion was about to be thrust into the national spotlight. Uncle Ray pulled out his phone. I'm calling a colleague who specializes in media relations. We need to get ahead of this. As the adults began making plans, Dion sat quietly, a new resolve forming within him. The handcuffs that had bound his wrists were gone, but he was still connected to this moment, to this injustice. He couldn't change what had happened to him, but maybe, just maybe, he could change what happened next. The community center gymnasium echoed with the sound of basketball shoes squeaking against polished wood. Dion stood at center court, nervously watching as people filed in through the double doors. 6 weeks had passed since his arrest, and today would determine whether his idea had any chance of success. You sure about this? Tyrell asked, bouncing a basketball against the floor. Dion nodded, though his stomach churned with uncertainty. Too late to back out now. On one side of the gym, a group of teenagers from various high schools across the city gathered, eyeing the other side of the room where several police officers in casual clothes stood awkwardly. The tension between the two groups was almost visible, like heat rising from hot pavement. Dion's mother approached from the refreshment table she'd been setting up. "The last few people are arriving now. Ready to start?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Dion replied. He scanned the room, noting the familiar faces. Coach Wilson stood near the bleachers talking with Dion's father. Uncle Ray was chatting with Captain Barnes near the door, an unlikely alliance that had formed in recent weeks. Even Mrs. Harper, from McDonald's, had come, bringing trays of cookies for the refreshment table. Most surprising of all was the presence of Officers Peterson and Torres. After the lawsuit had been settled, with conditions that included department-wide training reforms and community engagement requirements, Dion hadn't expected to see either officer again. Yet here they were, Peterson looking uncomfortable but present, Torres seeming genuinely interested in the proceedings. Dion took a deep breath and walked to the center of the court. The conversations gradually died down as people noticed him waiting. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the large space. "I know some of you are only here because your coach made you come." A few chuckles rose from the teenage side of the room. "And some of you are here because your captain suggested it would be good for department relations." Now a few of the officers smiled reluctantly. "But whatever brought you here, I appreciate you giving this a chance." Dion paused, looking around at the faces watching him. Some curious, some skeptical, some supportive. Most of you probably saw the video or heard the story. 6 weeks ago, I was wrongfully arrested at McDonald's. I was handcuffed in public, taken to the police station, and treated like a criminal, all because I matched a vague description of a robbery suspect. A murmur ran through the crowd. From the corner of his eye, Dion saw Officer Peterson shift uncomfortably. What happened next got all the attention. When they discovered my mom's a doctor, my dad works for the city, and my uncle's a federal judge. Suddenly, I wasn't just some kid in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was a story, the perfect victim. Dion took another steadying breath. But here's the thing. What happened to me happens to kids without connected families every day. And their stories don't make the news. They don't get settlements or apologies. They just get another reason not to trust the people who are supposed to protect them. Heads nodded on the teenage side of the room. One boy in the back called out, "That's right." After everything settled down, I had a choice to make, Dion continued. I could stay angry, and believe me, there were days when I wanted to. Or I could try to do something that might actually help. He gestured around the gym. That's why we're here. This program isn't about pretending everything's fine between police and young people in our community. It's about acknowledging that it's not fine, and then doing the hard work to make it better. Captain Barnes stepped forward. "If I may add something?" he asked, looking to Dion. Dion nodded, stepping aside to give him the floor. "What happened to Dion Taylor was wrong," the captain said simply. "As the head of this department, I take full responsibility for the actions of my officers. But taking responsibility isn't enough. We need to create real change." He turned to face the officers. "That's why participation in this program isn't just encouraged. It's going to be part of our ongoing training requirements. Because we can't protect and serve a community we don't understand." A surprised murmur ran through both sides of the room. This announcement was new, not something Dion or his family had expected. Uncle Ray moved to stand beside Captain Barnes. "And to ensure this program has the support it needs, the mayor's office has approved funding for the next 3 years. This won't be a one-time event, but an ongoing commitment to improving relations between law enforcement and young people in our city." Dion felt a wave of gratitude. His uncle and the captain had gone beyond what they'd discussed, securing long-term support for the initiative. "So," Dion said, reclaiming the floor, "here's how today will work. We're going to split into mixed teams, half officers, half students on each team. We'll play some basketball, get to know each other a little. Then we'll share a meal and talk about next steps." He pointed to a bulletin board where several flyers were posted. "We've got community service projects planned for the coming months, everything from park cleanups to tutoring programs to food drives. We'll be working side by side, getting to know each other as people, not just as uniforms or teenagers." The crowd's energy had shifted. the initial tension giving way to cautious interest. As Dion and Coach Wilson began organizing the basketball teams, Dion noticed Officer Torres approaching him. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Torres asked quietly. Dion hesitated, then nodded, stepping away from the others. "I've been wanting to say something to you," Torres began, his usual confidence absent. "About that night. I knew something wasn't right. The description was too vague, the timing didn't make sense, but I didn't speak up." Dion waited, letting the officer find his words. "I've been on the force 3 years," Torres continued. "Peterson's been my partner the whole time. I didn't want to question his judgment." He shook his head. "That's no excuse. I should have said something." "Why are you telling me this now?" Dion asked. Torres met his eyes directly. "Because if this program is going to work, it has to be built on honesty. And I want it to work. I need it to work. Because I became a cop to help people, not to make them afraid of me." Before Dion could respond, a commotion near the door drew their attention. A group of people with cameras and microphones was trying to enter, but Uncle Ray and Captain Barnes were blocking their way. "Press," Torres explained. "Your story's still big news." Dion sighed. The media attention had become exhausting. Reporters calling the house, photographers trying to catch him at school, social media accounts he'd never heard of sending him messages. His parents had hired someone to manage the requests, but they still kept coming. "They can wait," Dion decided. "Today isn't for them." Torres nodded approvingly. "So we playing basketball or what?" For the next hour, the gym filled with the sounds of genuine competition and surprising camaraderie. Initial awkwardness gave way to trash talk and laughter. Dion found himself guarding Officer Peterson during one game, an encounter that could have been tense but somehow wasn't. They were just 2 people playing basketball, the uniform and the handcuffs temporarily forgotten. After the games, everyone gathered around tables set up along one wall. As they ate pizza and cookies, conversations continued, some light, some surprisingly deep. Dion overheard one officer explaining police procedures to a group of curious teenagers. "If you get pulled over, here's what we're looking for. Here's why we approach the way we do." At another table, a girl from Jefferson High was describing what it felt like to see police cars in her neighborhood. "My little brother gets scared every time. That's not how it should be, right?" The officer listening to her nodded solemnly. "No, it's not." As the event wound down, people exchanged phone numbers and signed up for upcoming service projects. What had started as 2 separate groups now mingled freely, the invisible line down the middle of the gym erased. Dion's parents found him as he was helping clean up. "Well?" his father asked. "What do you think?" Dion looked around at what they had created together. "I think it's a good start." His mother smiled, pride evident in her eyes. "A very good start." As the last of the participants filed out, Captain Barnes approached with Officer Torres. "Taylor," the captain said, "I've been thinking about making this official. The department needs a youth liaison, someone who can bridge the gap between officers and young people. Torres here has volunteered for the position." Torres smiled tentatively. "If that's okay with you." Dion considered the officer who had once handcuffed him, now asking for his approval. The irony wasn't lost on him. "I think that's a great idea," he said finally. "But he's going to need help from the other side too." "What are you suggesting?" the captain asked. "A student counterpart," Dion explained. "Someone who can work with Torres, help organize events, make sure the students' perspectives are being heard." "You volunteering?" Torres asked with a knowing smile. Dion shook his head. "I'll help get things started, but I'm heading to college next year. This needs to continue after I'm gone." "So who then?" the captain asked. Dion glanced across the gym to where Tyrell was talking animatedly with a group of students and officers. "I have some ideas." As they left the community center that evening, Dion felt lighter than he had in weeks. The weight of that night at McDonald's hadn't disappeared completely. He doubted it ever would. But it had transformed into something he could carry differently now, something that pushed him forward instead of holding him back. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. but for the first time since those handcuffs had closed around his wrists, Dion felt something unexpected taking root alongside the anger and hurt. Hope. 6 months had passed since that night at McDonald's. The early summer air was warm as Dion adjusted his graduation cap, trying to get it to sit straight on his head. Through the open window of his bedroom, he could hear cars pulling up outside, family arriving for the celebration. "You about ready?" his father called from the hallway. "Almost," Dion replied, giving up on the cap and turning to check his appearance one last time in the mirror. The blue graduation gown covered his dress shirt and tie. In a few hours, he'd be walking across the stage at Jefferson High, receiving his diploma with the rest of his class. Then off to college in the fall, Georgetown University, where he'd decided to study criminal justice and public policy. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Tyrell. "News van's already at school. Guess who they're waiting for?" Dion sighed. Even after 6 months, his story still drew attention. Just last week, a national magazine had run a feature on the Bridge the Gap program, the official name of the initiative he'd started between local teens and the police department. The article had praised the program's success and highlighted similar efforts springing up in other cities. Another text came through, this one from Officer Torres. "Big day. Don't trip on stage. We're all rooting for you." That made Dion smile. Torres had become an unexpected ally over the past months. As the department's youth liaison, he'd thrown himself into the role with surprising dedication. Together with Tyrell, who had taken on the student leadership position, they had expanded the program to include all 5 high schools in the district. A knock at his bedroom door interrupted his thoughts. His mother peeked in, already dressed in her finest for graduation. "Look at you," she said, her eyes growing misty. "So handsome." "Mom, don't start crying yet," Dion pleaded. "We haven't even left the house." She laughed, quickly wiping her eyes. "I'm just so proud of you. Not just for graduating, but for everything you've done this year, everything you've overcome." Dion looked down, slightly embarrassed by her praise, but appreciating it all the same. "I had help." "Yes, you did," she agreed. "But it was your vision. Your courage to turn something painful into something good." From downstairs came the sound of more arrivals. Excited voices. Laughter, the front door opening and closing repeatedly. "You ready to face the crowd?" his mother asked. Dion nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Downstairs, the house had filled with relatives. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all there to celebrate his graduation. Uncle Ray stood talking with Dion's father near the fireplace, both men looking up with broad smiles as Dion descended the stairs. "There he is," Uncle Ray called out. "The man of the hour." Everyone turned, applauding as Dion reached the bottom of the stairs. He felt his face grow warm with embarrassment, but he smiled, genuinely moved by their support. His grandmother approached, adjusting his cap with experienced hands. "Now it'll stay," she assured him with a wink. "We should head to the school," his father announced, checking his watch. "They want graduates there early for lineup." As the family began moving toward the door, Dion's phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert, something he'd started receiving ever since his name had begun appearing in the media. The headline made him stop in his tracks. "Governor signs police reform bill inspired by Taylor case." He clicked on the article, skimming quickly. The bill included new training requirements for officers, stricter guidelines for detaining minors, and funding for community policing initiatives like Bridge the Gap. It had passed with bipartisan support, something almost unheard of in the current political climate. "Dion?" his father called from the doorway. "Everything okay?" Dion looked up from his phone, a complex mix of emotions washing over him. The police reform bill passed. The governor just signed it. His father's expression softened with understanding. "Your uncle mentioned it might happen today. Quite a graduation gift." Dion nodded, not trusting himself to speak. 6 months ago, he'd been handcuffed and humiliated. Now his experience had helped change the law. It felt surreal, both too big to comprehend and somehow not big enough to erase what had happened. The drive to Jefferson High passed in a blur of conversation and nervous excitement. As they approached the school, Dion spotted the news vans Tyrell had mentioned, parked near the main entrance. "Just ignore them," his mother advised from the front seat. "This day is about you and your classmates, not their story." Dion nodded, though he knew it wasn't that simple. His story and his identity had become intertwined in ways he was still learning to navigate. In the school parking lot, he spotted a familiar figure leaning against a police cruiser. Officer Peterson stood in his dress uniform, looking uncomfortable but determined. He straightened as Dion's family car pulled into a parking space. "I'll catch up with you inside," Dion told his parents, gesturing toward Peterson. His father followed his gaze, frowning slightly. "You sure?" "I'm sure," Dion confirmed. As his family headed toward the gymnasium where graduates were gathering, Dion walked over to Peterson. The officer had been a reluctant participant in the Bridge the Gap program, attending the minimum required events but rarely engaging beyond what was necessary. "Officer Peterson," Dion greeted him. "Didn't expect to see you here." Peterson nodded stiffly. "Wanted to come." Seemed important. An awkward silence fell between them. Unlike Torres, Peterson had never directly apologized for the arrest. Their interactions over the past months had been civil but distant. "I heard the reform bill passed," Peterson finally said. "Just this morning," Dion confirmed. Peterson shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Some of the guys at the station aren't happy about it. Say it ties our hands." Dion waited, sensing there was more, but I think... Peterson paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I think maybe we need our hands tied a little. Maybe we've been too quick to..." He trailed off, but Dion understood what he was trying to say. "You know," Dion said, "there's an opening for another officer in the Bridge the Gap summer program. We're doing a camp for middle school kids, teaching them about civic engagement, community service, having them work alongside officers." Peterson looked surprised at the implicit invitation. "You think that's a good idea?"
Me working with kids?
"I think it might be," Dion said honestly. "You've got 20 years of experience on the force. That's valuable. But maybe there are some things you could learn from them too." Before Peterson could respond, Torres pulled up in his own cruiser, parking beside Peterson's vehicle. He emerged in his dress uniform as well, a broad smile on his face. "Graduation day," he announced cheerfully. "Captain sent half the department. We're all proud of you, man." Dion felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks for coming." "Both of you." Torres clapped Peterson on the shoulder. "Did you ask him yet?" Peterson shook his head. "Didn't get to it." "Ask me what?" Dion inquired. Torres grinned. Peterson here had an idea. "Tell him." Peterson cleared his throat, looking even more uncomfortable. "I was thinking, the program works with high school kids, and now you're adding middle school. But what about elementary? Catching them younger before they develop?" "You know, fear." Dion stared at him in surprise. This was unexpected, Peterson actually thinking about expanding the program. "That's actually a really good idea," Dion admitted. "He wants to start with reading programs," Torres added. "Officers coming to schools, reading to kids, letting them see we're just regular people. Would you help set it up?" Peterson asked, finally meeting Dion's eyes directly. "Before you leave for college? Your name carries weight now." The irony wasn't lost on Dion. This officer who had once seen him as just another suspect now valued his opinion, his influence. "I'd be happy to help," Dion said. "And I know Terrell would be interested too." The sound of the band warming up drifted from the football field where the ceremony would take place. "I should get inside," Dion said. "They'll be lining us up soon." Both officers nodded. "We'll be in the audience," Torres assured him. As Dion turned to go, Peterson called after him. "Taylor," Dion looked back. "What you did, turning what happened into something positive. Not everyone would have made that choice." Peterson's expression was the most open Dion had ever seen it. "It's made a difference. More than you probably know." Dion nodded, accepting the closest thing to an apology he was likely to get from Peterson. Inside the school, the hallways buzzed with excitement as graduates in blue gowns hugged, took photos, and adjusted each other's caps. Tyrell spotted him immediately, breaking away from a group to rush over. "Dude, did you hear about the bill?" "We did that." Dion grinned, bumping fists with his friend. "We helped, at least." "More than helped," Tyrell insisted. "Your uncle said your case was the tipping point. They named part of it after you, the Taylor Initiative for Youth Police Relations." Before Dion could process this new information, their principal appeared, clipboard in hand. "Places, everyone. Line up alphabetically in the gym." As they joined the organized chaos of graduation preparations, Dion felt a sense of completion. His high school journey was ending in ways he never could have imagined on that night 6 months ago when officers approached him at McDonald's. The handcuffs that had bound his wrists had become a key, unlocking possibilities for change that extended far beyond his own experience. The fear and anger that had kept him awake at night had transformed into purpose and determination. When he walked across the stage an hour later, accepting his diploma to thunderous applause, Dion spotted Officer Torres and Peterson standing with his family. In the audience were dozens of teens from the Bridge the Gap program. Captain Barnes was there too, in full dress uniform, standing respectfully as Dion's name was called. Later, surrounded by well-wishers at his family's backyard graduation party, Dion found a quiet moment to slip away to the porch steps. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn where his cousins played tag between clusters of chatting adults. His father found him there, sitting down beside him with a contented sigh. "Quite a journey," his father observed. Dion nodded, looking out at the gathered celebration. "Not the one I expected." "The best journeys rarely are," his father replied. "You know, when you were handcuffed that night, all I felt was rage. I wanted to tear that police station apart brick by brick." "I remember," Dion said quietly, "but you found another way. A better way." His father's voice filled with emotion. "You turned a moment that could have hardened you into one that opened up possibilities for change." Dion thought about Georgetown waiting in the fall, about the Taylor Initiative becoming law, about Peterson's reluctant evolution and Torres's enthusiastic support, about Terrell carrying on the program after he left. "It's just the beginning," Dion said. "There's still so much work to do." His father put an arm around his shoulders. "And you've built a foundation for that work. That's more than most people accomplish in a lifetime, let alone before their high school graduation." From inside the house, Dion could hear his mother calling them back to cut the cake. As he stood to rejoin the celebration, Dion felt the weight of the past 6 months, not as a burden but as a responsibility he was now ready to carry forward into whatever came next. The handcuffs were long gone. In their place was something much stronger: purpose.